You actually thought you had a chance with me? Her laughter cut through the restaurant like shattered glass. Every head turned, every fork froze. She stood there in her designer dress, diamonds catching the chandelier light, looking down at him like he was something stuck to her heel. "I don't date the help," she announced, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I mean, look at those hands. What do you do? Fix toilets for a living?" The table next to them snickered. A woman near the window recorded on her phone. The waiter pretended to polish a glass while watching the massacre unfold. She grabbed her clutch and walked toward the bar where her friends waited with cruel smiles, their laughter echoing off the marble floors. He didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't say a single word, just lifted his coffee cup and took a slow sip while the restaurant buzzed with whispers about the poor fool who'd aimed too high. Then the door opened. A man in his 60s walked in. Silver hair, rigid posture, eyes that had seen wars. He scanned the room for someone, and then he saw the man sitting alone at that table. The color drained from his face. His hand trembled. And in front of everyone who had just witnessed that humiliation, he snapped to attention and saluted. This isn't a story about a bad blind date. It's about a war hero who chose to disappear, a daughter who gave him reasons to live, and an arrogant woman who's about to learn that the man she just destroyed in public once held her father's life in his hands. By the way, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below, and subscribe with the bell on because this ending delivers the kind of satisfying karma that restores your faith in justice. Before we get to the satisfying moment, her satisfying entire world collapsed. Let me take you back to where this night began. 6 hours earlier, Marcus Cole stood in front of his bathroom mirror, trying to remember how to tie a tie. His fingers fumbled with the silk. It had been years since he'd worn one. Funerals didn't count, and he'd stopped attending military functions long before his discharge papers were signed. The tie was navy blue, slightly outdated, purchased from a thrift store 3 towns over where nobody would recognize him. "Daddy, you look handsome." He turned to find Lily standing in the doorway, her stuffed rabbit dangling from one hand, her eyes wide with that particular hope only 7-year-olds possess. "Yeah?" He knelt down to her level. "You think so?" "Mommy would think so too." The words hit him somewhere deep, in that place he kept locked and guarded. He pulled Lily into a hug, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. "I don't have to go," he said. "We could watch a movie instead. Make popcorn, the extra buttery kind." Lily pulled back, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mrs. Patterson says you need to get out more. She says Mommy would want you to be happy." Mrs. Patterson, his late wife's best friend, the woman who'd arranged this blind date despite his protests, who'd shown up last week with a photograph of some executive's daughter and words like "perfect match" and "give it a chance." He'd said no 17 times. Lily had overheard the 18th conversation and asked why Daddy didn't want to make a new friend. So here he was, tying a thrift store tie, going to a restaurant he couldn't afford, meeting a woman who existed in a world he'd deliberately left behind. "I'll be home by 9, he promised. "If she's mean, you can leave early." Lily's wisdom cut straight through. "That's what you tell me about the kids at school." He kissed her forehead. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned it from you." The babysitter arrived at 6. Marcus gave final instructions. Bedtime at 8, no extra cookies. Call if anything happens, and stepped out into the cool evening air. His truck sat in the driveway, rust creeping along the wheel wells, engine held together by stubbornness and prayer. He could have had better, could have had everything. The offers still came sometimes, encrypted emails to an address he rarely checked, asking if Commander Ghost was ready to return. He never replied. The drive downtown took 40 minutes. He watched the neighborhood shift, from modest homes with chain-link fences to manicured lawns to gleaming towers of glass and steel. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of one such tower, its name written in gold script above doors that probably cost more than his annual salary. He parked 3 blocks away, cheaper meters. Walking toward those golden doors, Marcus Cole felt the familiar weight settle onto his shoulders. Not fear, never fear, just awareness. The same awareness that had kept him alive through 12 combat deployments, that had guided him through darkness most people couldn't imagine. He straightened his thrift store tie. He pushed open the door, and he stepped into the world that was about to try its very best to break him. The lobby hit him like a wall of wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped from ceilings that stretched impossibly high. Marble floors gleamed like frozen milk. Men in suits that cost more than his truck laughed over glasses of amber liquid, while women draped in silk floated between tables like expensive ghosts. Marcus stood just inside the entrance, letting his eyes adjust, not to the light, to the excess. A maitre d' materialized beside him, appearing from nowhere, with the silent efficiency of someone paid to judge quickly and act accordingly. His gaze traveled from Marcus's shoes, polished but worn, to his tie, adequate but dated, to his face, calm but clearly out of place. "May I help you, sir?" The pause before "sir" said, "Everything. I have a reservation, Cole, party of 2. The maitre d' consulted his leather-bound book with exaggerated slowness. His eyebrow lifted a fraction of an inch. "Ah, yes, the Ashford reservation." Another pause. "Miss Ashford arranged the booking. She requested our finest table." His eyes flickered to Marcus's jacket. "Are you quite certain you're in the right place?" "I'm certain." Something in his voice made the maitre d' step back, almost imperceptibly. A survival instinct, perhaps. The recognition that some men carry danger quietly, like a concealed weapon. "Right this way." The table sat near the center of the restaurant, visible from all angles, surrounded by the city's elite. A strategic choice, Marcus realized. Not for intimacy, for display. Whoever Victoria Ashford was, she wanted to be seen. He sat with his back to the wall. Old habits, the menu had no prices. Another old trick for another kind of battlefield. If you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. He ordered water and waited. She arrived 23 minutes late. Victoria Ashford entered like she expected applause. Blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders. A dress that caught light and threw it back like a challenge. Heels that clicked against marble with the rhythm of someone who'd never doubted her welcome anywhere. She was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that knew its own power and wielded it without mercy. Her eyes found him across the room. He watched her expression shift. Curiosity to confusion, to something that looked almost like offense. She'd expected someone else. Someone who matched the restaurant. Someone who matched her. She crossed to the table without hurrying. Let him wait. Let him watch her approach. Let him understand the favor she was granting by showing up at all. "You're Marcus?" She didn't offer her hand. "I am," She sat across from him, immediately flagging a waiter. Martini, dry, 3 olives, and bring a real menu, not the tourist version. The iu waiter scurried away. Victoria turned her attention to Marcus, like a scientist examining an unexpected specimen. So, she drew the word out. Linda said you were interesting. Did she? She failed to mention you'd be dressed like a high school principal from 2003. The insult landed softly. He'd heard worse in languages she couldn't pronounce, from men who meant it with bullets. I appreciate you meeting me, he said. I know your time is valuable. It is. She sipped water, leaving lipstick on the glass. Extremely, so let's not waste it. What do you do, Marcus? I work at Jefferson Elementary, maintenance. Her martini arrived. She drank half of it before responding. Maintenance. The word dripped from her mouth like something spoiled. You mean you're a janitor? I fix things, heating systems, plumbing, whatever needs attention. Plumbing, she laughed, a sharp, cutting sound. Linda set me up with a plumber. That's incredible. That's actually incredible. The couple, at the next table, glanced over. Victoria didn't lower her voice. If anything, she raised it. Do you know who I am? I'm the CFO of Ashford Defense Industries. I manage a $4 billion portfolio. I've had dinner with senators, with ambassadors, with actual important people. She leaned forward. And Linda sends me a man who unclogs toilets. Marcus set down his water glass with careful precision. I also have a daughter, he said quietly. She's 7. Her name is Lily. She's the reason I do what I do. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something flickered across Victoria's face, something almost human. Then it vanished. How sweet, a single dad with a sad story. She finished her martini and signaled for another. Let me guess, wife left you, couldn't handle the glamorous lifestyle of a school janitor? She passed away, cancer, 3 years ago. The table went silent. Victoria's second martini arrived. She grabbed it like a lifeline, refusing to acknowledge what she'd just stepped in. Well, she said finally, this has been enlightening. Victoria's fingers tightened around her martini glass. The mention of death had thrown her off balance, but she recovered quickly. Women like her always did. Vulnerability was a currency she refused to trade in. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, the words mechanical, but that doesn't change the fundamental issue here. Which is, we're not compatible. She gestured between them, like the air itself proved her point. Look at you. Look at me. This isn't snobbery. It's mathematics. Our worlds don't intersect. Marcus studied her face. Behind the perfect makeup and practiced cruelty, he recognized something familiar. Fear. The kind that builds walls so high the person inside forgets they're trapped. You might be surprised, he said, how often different worlds collide. Spare me the fortune cookie wisdom. She pulled out her phone, checking messages with theatrical boredom. I have a meeting in Milan next week, a dinner with the Secretary of Defense next month. My calendar doesn't have room for... She waved her hand at him. Whatever this is. The waiter approached tentatively, sensing the tension like an animal scenting smoke. Are you ready to order? I'll have the Wagyu, Victoria said, without looking up. Rare, truffle reduction on the side, and another martini. The waiter turned to Marcus. And for you, sir? Just the soup of the day, thank you. Victoria's laugh was a blade. The soup, of course. Let me guess, checking your bank account between courses? I like soup. You can't afford anything else. Marcus smiled slightly. It wasn't defensive or wounded. It was the smile of a man who'd learned that words were just wind, and wind couldn't touch what mattered. "My daughter and I make soup together on Sundays," he said. "It's become our tradition. She stands on a step stool and stirs while I chop vegetables. Last week she added way too much pepper, and we both cried eating it, but we finished every bowl." He paused. "So yes, I like soup." For the second time, something shifted in Victoria's expression. A crack in the porcelain, but she sealed it quickly, hardening her features into familiar contempt. "Adorable. Really, a Hallmark movie waiting to happen." She drained her third martini. "But I didn't come here for heartwarming anecdotes about pepper and step stools. I came because Linda swore you were worth my time." Her eyes raked over him. Clearly, she was wrong. At the bar across the room, two women watched with obvious interest. Victoria's friends. Marcus had clocked them the moment they'd started whispering and pointing. They wore matching expressions of cruel amusement, phones angled to capture the slow-motion disaster at the center table. Victoria noticed him notice. "Oh, those are my girls, checking in on me." She wiggled her fingers at them in a wave. "Making sure I haven't been kidnapped by the maintenance man. They seem supportive. They're protective. There's a difference." She leaned forward, elbows on the table, chin resting on manicured fingers. "Do you know what my father does, Marcus? He's a general, 3 stars. He's commanded thousands of men in combat. He's dined with presidents, shaped military policy, protected this country for 40 years. Sounds like an impressive man. He is, and he raised me to recognize quality." Her smile turned poisonous. "To spot the difference between men who matter and men who fix toilets." Marcus felt the words land, absorbed them, let them pass through. He thought of Lily at home, probably convincing the babysitter to let her stay up past bedtime. He thought of his wife's last words, whispered through morphine fog. "Take care of our girl. That's all that matters." He'd kept that promise, every single day. "Your father sounds like someone who understands sacrifice," Marcus said carefully. "Military men usually do. They know that the uniform doesn't make the soldier. The service does." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Are you lecturing me about my own father?" "Just making an observation." "Well, observe this." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against marble, loud enough to turn heads. "This date is over. It was over the moment you walked in wearing that tragic tie and ordered soup like some kind of Depression-era refugee. The restaurant fell into that particular silence that precedes spectacle. Forks hovered. Conversations died. Even the soft jazz seemed to fade. Victoria smoothed her dress, preparing for her exit. "I'm going to tell Linda exactly what I think of her matchmaking skills. And you?" She looked down at him with something approaching pity. "You should stick to your own kind, Marcus. Plumbers, janitors, people who understand their place in the world." She turned toward the bar, toward her waiting friends, toward the laughter that was already bubbling up. Marcus remained seated. His soup arrived. He picked up his spoon, and behind him, completely unnoticed, the restaurant's front door began to open. The door swung wide, and a gust of evening air swept through the lobby. Marcus didn't turn. He kept his eyes on his soup, spoon moving in slow circles, creating small whirlpools in the broth. But his body registered the change, the subtle shift in atmosphere, the way conversations near the entrance stuttered and stopped. Victoria had reached her friends at the bar. They huddled together like hyenas after a kill, voices pitched just loud enough to carry. "You should have seen his face," Victoria was saying, "like a puppy that wandered into traffic. Completely lost." "Did he actually order soup?" One friend pressed her hand to her chest in mock horror. "At Lumiere, that's social suicide." "He probably thought it was fancy because it came in a bowl instead of a can." Laughter erupted, sharp, cruel, deliberate, the kind designed to wound from a distance. Marcus lifted a spoonful of soup. Butternut, squash. Decent, but Lily's version was better. More cinnamon, more love. At the entrance, the maitre d' straightened like a soldier snapping to attention. His entire demeanor transformed. Servile efficiency replaced by something approaching reverence. "General Ashford, what an honor, sir. We weren't expecting you this evening." The name cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. General Ashford, Victoria's father, the man she'd been boasting about not 5 minutes earlier. Marcus's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. He knew that name. Knew it the way you know the names written on your own scars. Raymond Ashford, 3-star general, Operation Desert Shield, Operation Enduring Freedom, the ambush outside Kandahar in 2009 that went sideways so fast even command lost track of the body count. Marcus set down his spoon. "I'm looking for my daughter," the general's voice carried across the restaurant. "Victoria. She mentioned she'd be dining here tonight." "Of course, sir. She's just at the bar. Allow me to. I'll find her myself." Footsteps on marble, measured, authoritative. The walk of a man who'd led battalions through hell and expected the world to make way. Marcus kept his back to the entrance. His hands rested flat on the table, steady as stone. 13 years of training had taught him that stillness was its own kind of armor. The footsteps grew closer, then stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. No clinking glasses, no murmured conversations. Even Victoria's laughter at the bar died mid-note. Marcus felt eyes on his back, felt the weight of recognition like a physical force. "No," the general's voice was barely a whisper. "It can't be." Slowly, Marcus turned in his chair. Raymond Ashford stood 6 feet away. Older now, silver where there'd been gray, lines carved deeper by years and command. But the eyes were the same. The eyes Marcus had watched flutter closed in that blood-soaked valley, certain he was watching a man die. The general's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Confusion, disbelief, dawning recognition, and finally something that looked almost like awe. "Ghost?" the word cracked. "Commander Ghost?" Marcus rose from his chair. Old instincts took over. His posture straightened, shoulders back, chin level, the bearing of a man who'd worn authority like a second skin. "Hello, Raymond." The general's hand flew to his forehead in a salute so crisp, so automatic, that his body moved before his mind could catch up. 3 stars on his shoulder, 4 decades of service, and he saluted like a private before a commanding officer. "Commander Cole," his voice rang through the silent restaurant. "It's an honor, sir." At the bar, Victoria's martini glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered against the floor, a crystalline explosion that nobody moved to clean. "Wait," Victoria's voice came out strange, strangled. "Daddy, why are you saluting him?" The general didn't lower his hand. Didn't break eye contact with Marcus. "This man," he said, each word weighted with something Victoria had never heard in her father's voice. "Reverence is Commander Marcus Cole, codename Ghost, most decorated Special Forces operator of his generation." Victoria stepped forward on unsteady heels, glass crunching beneath her feet. That's impossible. He's a janitor. He fixes toilets. He carried me 6 miles through enemy territory. The general's voice broke. With 2 bullets in his leg, held my insides together with his bare hands for 6 hours until extraction arrived. The restaurant had become a tomb. Every patron frozen, every waiter motionless. The couple who'd snickered earlier stared with mouths hanging open. Victoria's friends had stopped recording. Their phones hung limp at their sides. He received the Congressional Medal of Honor, General Ashford continued, the highest military decoration this country can bestow, and he asked them to file it quietly because he didn't want the attention. His salute finally dropped. His eyes glistened. This man is the reason you have a father, Victoria. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Victoria's face had gone pale, not the delicate pallor of surprise, but the bloodless white of someone watching their entire worldview collapse in real time. No. She shook her head slowly. That's not possible. You never mentioned anyone named Cole. I mentioned Ghost. The general's voice was quiet now, almost tender. I've told you about Ghost 100 times. The man who saved my life. The man I've spent 15 years trying to find so I could thank him properly. Marcus remained standing, posture perfect, face unreadable. He'd learned long ago that silence spoke louder than words in moments like these. But Ghost was... Victoria's hands trembled at her sides. You described him like he was a legend, a superhero, some kind of mythical... He was sitting right here, General. Ashford gestured at the table with its cooling soup and single water glass. Eating soup while you... He stopped. His jaw tightened. While I what, Daddy? The general turned to look at his daughter fully for the first time since entering the restaurant. The love in his eyes was still there. It would always be there. But now it shared space with something else. Disappointment so profound, it seemed to age him 10 years in 10 seconds. I heard you from the entrance, Victoria. I heard everything. The color that had drained from her face rushed back in a crimson flood. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't know, she whispered. How could I possibly know? That's exactly the point. General Ashford moved toward Marcus, each step deliberate, weighted with 15 years of unspoken gratitude. When he reached the table, he extended his hand, not for a handshake, but palm up, like an offering. Marcus looked at that hand, remembered it covered in blood and sand, gripping his sleeve while the life leaked out. Remembered the promise he'd made in that valley. You're not dying today, Raymond. Your daughter still needs you. He took the general's hand, gripped it firmly. It's been a long time, Marcus said. Too long. The general's voice cracked. I looked for you. After you left the service, you just vanished. No forwarding address, no contact information. It was like you'd never existed. That was the idea. Why? The question carried 15 years of confusion. You could have had anything, any position, any salary, any honor. The Pentagon would have created a job just to keep you. Why disappear? Marcus glanced past the general to the table where he'd been sitting alone, to the chair Victoria had occupied while cataloging his failures. My wife was sick, he said simply. My daughter needed me. The things I could give them didn't require a uniform or a title. The general closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were wet. Sarah, I remember you talking about her. On the helicopter out of that valley, you kept saying her name, saying you had to get home to Sarah. She passed 3 years ago. I'm sorry, Marcus. Truly. Silence settled between them. The comfortable silence of men who'd shared something words couldn't capture. Behind them, the restaurant remained frozen. Dozens of witnesses to a reunion none of them understood, but all of them felt. If this moment is giving you chills, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what happens next between father and daughter is something you won't want to miss. Victoria stood apart, arms wrapped around herself, like she was trying to hold her pieces together. Her friends had abandoned their posts at the bar, slinking toward the exit with the practiced retreat of people who wanted no association with the coming storm. Daddy, her voice came out small, childlike. He didn't say anything. He just sat there while you, what? The general released Marcus's hand and turned to face his daughter fully. While you mocked him for his clothes, his job, his life choices, I didn't know who he was. And if he'd been exactly who you thought, a janitor, a maintenance worker, a single father doing his best, would that have made your behavior acceptable? Victoria's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The man you ridiculed in front of this entire restaurant chose his life deliberately. The general's voice rose, commanding attention the way it had commanded troops. He walked away from more money and power than you'll ever see because he understood something you apparently don't. What? General Ashford looked at Marcus with something approaching reverence. That a man's worth isn't measured by his job title or his watch or his table at a fancy restaurant. He turned back to Victoria. It's measured by what he's willing to sacrifice for the people he loves. The words landed like artillery shells. Victoria, Ashford, CFO of a billion-dollar company, finally had nothing to say. The restaurant had become a courtroom. Every patron sat as judge and jury. Their earlier amusement curdled into uncomfortable silence. The couple who had snickered now studied their plates with desperate intensity. The waiter who delivered Marcus's soup with barely concealed condescension pressed himself against a pillar, wishing for invisibility. Victoria stood isolated in the center of it all, marooned between her father's disappointment and the wreckage of her assumptions. Daddy, please, her voice trembled. Can we discuss this somewhere private? Why? General Ashford's question cracked like a whip. You had no problem performing for an audience 5 minutes ago, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear, making sure they all knew exactly what you thought of this man. That was different. How? Explain to me how humiliating someone publicly is different from being held accountable publicly. Victoria's eyes darted around the room, searching for allies and finding none. Her friends had vanished completely. The maitre d' who'd sneered at Marcus now stood at rigid attention near the kitchen, suddenly respectful of proper hierarchy. Marcus watched it unfold with careful neutrality. He'd seen commanders dress down subordinates before. He'd done it himself, in another life. But there was no satisfaction in watching Victoria crumble, only a tired recognition of patterns repeated across generations. Raymond, his voice cut through the tension, quiet but impossible to ignore. The general turned, his face still flushed with righteous anger. This isn't necessary, Marcus continued. She made assumptions. Most people do. I've spent years making sure those assumptions would be made. That doesn't excuse... No, but understanding matters more than punishment. Marcus pulled his jacket from the chair where it hung, Your daughter doesn't need a public lesson. She needs a private conversation with her father about what really matters in life. General Ashford stared at him. The anger in his expression slowly transformed into something else. A profound respect that went beyond military ranks or medals of honor. You're defending her. It wasn't a question. After everything she said, I'm not defending what she did. I'm recognizing that cruelty usually grows from wounds we can't see. Marcus glanced at Victoria, who stood frozen, tears beginning to streak her perfect makeup. She's your daughter, Raymond. That means there's good in her, even if it's buried deep. The words landed somewhere in Victoria's chest. She felt them take root, painful and unfamiliar. How can you? She couldn't finish the sentence. Her throat had closed around the words. Marcus faced her fully for the first time since her father's arrival. She braced for anger, for revenge, for the cutting remarks she deserved thrown back with interest. Instead, she found only calm, a patience so deep it felt infinite. When I was in the field, he said, I learned something about people. We're all capable of terrible things when we're afraid. Fear makes us small, makes us cruel, makes us see threats where there are only strangers. I wasn't afraid of you. No? He tilted his head slightly. A man shows up who doesn't match your expectations, doesn't play by your rules, doesn't scramble to impress you or apologize for existing. That kind of quiet confidence terrifies people who've built their identity on external validation. Victoria's breath caught. The observation was surgical, precise. It opened something she'd kept locked for years. I'm not... She stopped, swallowed, started again. I didn't mean to be... Mean? Marcus supplied. Cruel? Dismissive? She flinched at each word. You meant every bit of it, he continued. In that moment, you meant it completely. The question isn't whether you meant it. The question is whether that's who you want to be. General Ashford watched the exchange with growing wonder. He'd seen Marcus Cole lead men through impossible situations, had witnessed him make life or death decisions with terrifying clarity. But this was different. This was a kind of leadership that had nothing to do with rank or authority. This was simply who the man was. I should go, Marcus said, shrugging on his jacket. My daughter's waiting. Her bedtime was an hour ago, and the babysitter charges extra after 9. Marcus, wait! The general stepped forward. Please, I've spent 15 years wanting to thank you properly, to tell you what your sacrifice meant to me, to my family. You can't just leave. I'm not disappearing again, Raymond. I'm just going home. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a worn business card. The school's number. Call during lunch hours. We can catch up properly when there's less. He gestured vaguely at the restaurant. Audience. The general took the card like it was made of gold. Marcus turned toward the exit. Wait! Victoria's voice stopped him. Please, just wait. He paused, didn't turn around. I need to say something, she continued, her voice breaking. Please let me say something. Marcus stopped 3 steps from the door. He didn't turn around, just stood there, silhouetted against the golden light of the lobby, waiting. The entire restaurant held its breath. Victoria moved forward on unsteady legs. Her heels clicked against the marble. The same confident rhythm from her entrance, now stuttering and uncertain. She stopped 5 feet behind him, close enough to speak, far enough to feel the distance she'd created. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't apologize. That's not something I do. Then don't. The words surprised her. What? Marcus turned slowly. His face held no anger, no satisfaction, no judgment. Just that same impossible calm that had unnerved her from the beginning. An apology you don't mean is worse than silence, he said. If you're only saying sorry because your father is watching, because you're embarrassed, because the audience flipped, save it. I don't need words. I never did. Victoria felt the truth of it cut through her. He was right. Part of her, most of her, wanted to apologize just to end the discomfort, to smooth things over, to escape this moment and pretend it never happened. But something else stirred beneath the shame, something she hadn't felt in years. When I was 12, she heard herself say, my father was deployed for 18 months, longest deployment of his career. General Ashford shifted behind her, but said nothing. My mother cried every night. I could hear her through the walls, and I decided then that I would never be that vulnerable. Never let anyone have that kind of power over me. Victoria's voice cracked, but she pushed forward. So I built walls, made myself untouchable, measured everyone by what they could offer me, because if I never needed anyone, no one could ever hurt me. Marcus listened without interrupting. His eyes never left her face. Tonight, when you walked in, she gestured at him helplessly. You didn't match anything in my system. You weren't impressed by me, weren't intimidated, weren't trying to impress me back. You just existed, comfortably, like you didn't need my approval or anyone else's. I don't. I know. That's what scared me. Tears spilled freely now, cutting tracks through her foundation. Because if someone can be complete without all the things I've spent my life accumulating, the title, the money, the status, then what does that say about me? The question hung in the air between them. It says you're human, Marcus answered. It says you built armor to survive a childhood wound and forgot to take it off when the war ended. Victoria laughed, a broken, wet sound. You sound like a therapist. I've seen enough trauma to recognize the symptoms. He paused. Your father came home from that deployment, didn't he? He survived. Yes, because of people like me, people who wear thrift store ties and drive rusty trucks and choose soup over Wagyu. His voice remained gentle, but the words carried weight. The world you built to feel safe, it's built on the backs of invisible people, janitors who clean the hospitals, mechanics who maintain the jets, single fathers who show up every day for jobs that don't impress anyone at dinner parties. Victoria closed her eyes. The truth of it settled into her bones like cold water. I'm sorry. The words came out small. I'm sorry for what I said, not because my father is watching, not because everyone heard. I'm sorry because I was wrong, because I looked at you and saw nothing, and I was the one with nothing worth seeing. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Whatever he found in her face seemed to satisfy something in him. That apology, he said quietly, I'll accept. Victoria exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Now what? She asked. Now nothing. I go home to my daughter. You have a long conversation with your father. Tomorrow, you decide if tonight changes anything or becomes just another story you tell yourself to feel better before going back to exactly who you were. The bluntness should have stung. Instead, it felt like a gift. How do I become someone different? Marcus reached for the door handle, paused. You don't become someone different. You become more honest about who you already are. The cruelty tonight, that wasn't some stranger wearing your face. That was you. Own it. Then decide if you want to keep being her. He pushed the door open. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the sounds of the city, traffic, distant music, life continuing beyond the bubble of this restaurant. Marcus, General Ashford's voice stopped him one final time. Thank you for everything, then and now. Marcus nodded once, and then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Victoria stood frozen, staring at the space where Marcus had been. The restaurant remained silent, patrons afraid to move, waiters unsure of protocol, the maitre d' gripping his leather book like a shield. General Ashford approached his daughter slowly. His anger had burned down to embers, leaving behind something more complicated. He'd spent decades commanding troops, navigating politics, making impossible decisions. But standing before his only child, watching her world reshape itself in real time, he felt utterly unprepared. Victoria, she didn't respond. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door. Victoria, look at me, she turned. Her face was a ruin of mascara and tears, the careful architecture of her beauty stripped away. Underneath was someone he barely recognized, not the polished executive, not the confident socialite, but a frightened girl who'd spent 20 years hiding behind walls of her own construction. Daddy, her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. How could I possibly... Stop, he held up a hand. Stop apologizing for not knowing who he was. Start thinking about why it matters. What do you mean? General Ashford guided her toward an empty table near the window, away from the audience that had witnessed her humiliation. They sat across from each other like strangers meeting for the first time. If Marcus had been exactly who you thought, a janitor, a maintenance worker, a nobody, would you feel any differently about what you said? Victoria opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. The honest answer terrified her. I don't know, she whispered. That's the problem. Her father leaned forward, his voice low but intense. You've built a world where people only have value if they have something you want. Money, power, connections, status, and everyone else is just furniture. That's not fair, isn't it? He gestured around the restaurant. You chose this place because it filters out people who can't afford the prices. You chose your friends because they reflect well on your image. You chose your career path because it gave you leverage, not because it gave you meaning. Each observation landed like a blow. Victoria wanted to argue, to defend herself, to explain that he didn't understand. But the words died in her throat because he understood perfectly. He'd made her this way. I taught you wrong. The general's voice cracked unexpectedly. After your mother, after she spent all those nights crying while I was deployed, I came home determined to make sure you'd never be that vulnerable. I pushed you toward independence, strength, self-sufficiency. I wanted you to need no one. Victoria stared at her father. In 32 years, she'd never seen him this raw. You succeeded, she said quietly. No, I failed. He reached across the table and took her hand, something he hadn't done since she was a child. Independence isn't the same as isolation. Strength isn't the same as cruelty. I wanted you to be powerful, and instead I made you afraid. Afraid of connection, afraid of vulnerability, afraid of anyone who might see through your armor. The tears came fresh now, unstoppable. Daddy, that man who just walked out of here, he's the strongest person I've ever known, not because of his medals or his service record, because he chose love over glory. He had everything the world offers and traded it all to raise his daughter in a small apartment with a rusty truck and a job that impresses no one. General Ashford squeezed her hand tighter. That's what real strength looks like, Victoria. It's not about what you have. It's about what you're willing to give up for the people you love. If this father-daughter moment has you emotional, subscribe and turn on notifications, because Victoria's journey to redemption is just beginning, and the next chapter will show you if she's truly capable of change. Victoria sat with her father's words settling into places she'd kept locked for decades. The restaurant slowly returned to life around them, whispered conversations resuming, waiters moving cautiously, the delicate sounds of normalcy reasserting itself. But nothing was normal anymore. "What do I do now?" she asked. "How do I fix this?" "You don't fix it tonight. Tonight you sit with the discomfort. You let it teach you something." Her father released her hand and sat back. "Tomorrow you start making different choices, small ones, who you talk to, how you treat them, what you value. And Marcus?" General Ashford smiled sadly. "Marcus doesn't need anything from you. That's part of what makes him remarkable. He'll go home, kiss his daughter goodnight, and sleep peacefully, knowing exactly who he is." He stood, extending a hand to help her up. "The question isn't what Marcus needs. The question is what you need to become." The parking lot was nearly empty when Victoria and her father stepped outside. Cool night air hit her face, a sharp contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside. She inhaled deeply, tasting city exhaust and distant rain. The designer dress that had felt like armor now hung on her like a costume from a play she no longer wanted to perform. "Where's your car?" General Ashford asked. "Valet," she laughed hollowly. "Of course. Can't be seen walking to my own vehicle like a commoner." Her father studied her face under the parking lot lights. Something had shifted in her expression. The brittle perfection cracked, revealing uncertainty beneath. "I'll drive you home," he said. "You can get your car tomorrow." "I'm fine to drive." That wasn't a suggestion. Victoria recognized the tone, the same voice that had commanded battalions and brokered peace treaties. She nodded silently and followed him toward his sedan, a practical Buick, nothing flashy. She'd mocked him for it once, told him a man of his stature should drive something more impressive. He'd just smiled and said, "The car doesn't make the man, sweetheart." She understood now what he'd meant. They drove in silence through downtown streets, past gleaming towers and exclusive clubs, the geography of her carefully constructed life. It all looked different somehow, smaller, less substantial. "Tell me about him," Victoria said finally. "About what happened in the valley." General Ashford's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "We were ambushed outside Kandahar," he began slowly. 16 of us in the convoy. IED took out the lead vehicle. Then came the gunfire. Victoria watched his profile, saw the memories moving behind his eyes like shadows. "I took shrapnel to the abdomen, knew immediately it was bad, the kind of wound you don't walk away from. I gave orders for my men to leave me, to save themselves. But Marcus didn't. Ghost." Her father smiled at the name. "That's what we called him, because he moved like one. Silent, invisible, deadly when needed." The smile faded. "He appeared out of nowhere, killed 6 insurgents in under a minute. Then he picked me up like I weighed nothing and started walking. 6 miles. 6 miles through enemy territory. with 2 bullets in his leg that I didn't even know about until we reached extraction. General Ashford shook his head slowly. I kept telling him to leave me, kept ordering him. He just kept walking and said, "Respectfully, sir, I don't take orders from dead men, and you're not dying today." Victoria felt something twist in her chest. When we finally got to the helicopter, I was barely conscious. Lost so much blood, I flatlined twice on the flight to base. Her father's voice grew thick. The medic said if I'd waited another 20 minutes, there would have been nothing left to save. He saved your life. He gave me 15 more years with you. General Ashford glanced at her. Every birthday, every graduation, every argument, and every apology. Walking you down the aisle someday, holding my grandchildren. All of it is borrowed time. Time that Marcus Cole purchased with his own blood. The weight of it pressed down on Victoria until she couldn't breathe. And I called him a janitor, she whispered. I said he unclogs toilets. I laughed at his hands, the same hands that held your wounds closed for 6 hours. Yes. How can I live with that? Her father pulled the car to a stop outside her apartment building. A gleaming high-rise with a doorman and marble lobby and monthly fees that could pay Marcus's rent for a year. By becoming someone who deserves his forgiveness, General Ashford said. Whether or not you ever receive it, Victoria stared up at her building. At the penthouse windows on the 34th floor. At the life she'd built brick by brick on foundations she was only now recognizing as rotten. I don't know how, she admitted. I don't know how to be different. This is all I've ever been. Her father reached over and squeezed her hand. Start small. Tomorrow, notice the people you usually ignore. The doorman who opens your entrance. The barista who makes your coffee. The assistant whose name you never learned. He paused. See them, really see them. That's how it starts. Victoria nodded slowly, tears threatening again. Will you tell me more about him? About Marcus? Other stories from your time together? General Ashford smiled, the first genuine warmth since the restaurant. I'll tell you everything, but not tonight. Tonight you need to rest. Tomorrow is when the real work begins. She opened the car door, then hesitated. Daddy, thank you for not giving up on me. Never, he said. Not ever. Marcus pulled his truck into the driveway at 9:15. The porch light glowed amber through the darkness, a small beacon that Lily always insisted on leaving lit when he went out. So you can find your way home, she'd explained once, with the unshakable logic of a 7-year-old. He sat in the truck for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The night replayed itself behind his eyes. Victoria's cruelty, Raymond's salute, the restaurant's suffocating silence. He'd handled worse in combat zones, but something about tonight had reached past his defenses and touched the tender places he kept hidden. The front door opened before he reached the porch. You're late. Mrs. Patterson stood in the doorway, arms crossed, but her eyes were kind. She was 63, widowed, and had been Sarah's closest friend since college. After the funeral, she'd simply shown up and never stopped showing up. Sorry, Eleanor, the evening ran longer than expected. I'll bet it did. She grabbed her coat from the hook. Lily fought bedtime until 8:45, then crashed hard. She made you a card. It's on the kitchen table. Marcus smiled, despite everything. A card? For your date. She drew you and some mystery woman holding hands under a rainbow. Eleanor paused at the door, studying his face with the particular scrutiny of someone who'd known grief intimately. You okay, Marcus? You look heavy. Long night. I'll tell you about it sometime. Over coffee, this week. That's not a request. She patted his arm and disappeared into the darkness toward her house 3 doors down. Marcus locked the door behind him and moved through the small living room. Everything here told a story. Sarah's books still lining the shelves, Lily's artwork covering the refrigerator, the worn couch where they watched movies every Friday night. A modest life. A good life. He found the card on the kitchen table. Construction paper, folded unevenly, decorated with crayon hearts and stick figures. The taller figure had brown hair and a blue tie. The shorter figure beside him wore a yellow dress and what appeared to be a crown. Inside, in Lily's careful handwriting, "Dear Daddy, I hope your date was fun. Maybe she can come for Sunday soup. I love you to the moon and back. Love, Lily. P.S. You are the best. Daddy in the whole world." Marcus pressed the card against his chest. This was why he'd walked away from everything, why he'd traded medals for mop handles, classified briefings for clogged drains, because nothing the world offered could compare to coming home to a card made by small hands and a heart that loved without conditions. He climbed the stairs quietly and pushed open Lily's door. She slept sprawled across her bed, stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, nightlight casting soft shapes across the walls. Her breathing was slow and peaceful, the sleep of someone who felt completely safe in the world. Marcus knelt beside her bed, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered. "Daddy's home." She stirred slightly, eyes fluttering, but not opening. "Daddy? I'm here. Go back to sleep." "How was your date?" The words came out slurred with drowsiness. He thought about how to answer. The humiliation, the salute, the woman whose entire world had crumbled in the span of 10 minutes. "It was interesting," he said finally. "I met an old friend." "That's nice." Lily smiled without opening her eyes. "Did the lady like you?" Marcus stroked her hair gently. "I think she's still figuring some things out." "That's okay. People need time. The wisdom of a child, pure and unearned." "Mommy always said the best things take time, like soup and love." His throat tightened. "When did you get so smart?" "I learned it from Mommy." Lily's hand found his in the darkness, small fingers wrapping around his calloused palm. "And from you. You're both my teachers." Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and innocence. "I love you, Lilybug, to the moon and back." "To the moon and back," she mumbled, already drifting again. "And around all the stars." He stayed there until her breathing deepened into true sleep. Then he rose quietly, joints protesting from years of hard use, and made his way to his own room. The bed felt too large, as it always did. Sarah's side remained empty. He still couldn't bring himself to sleep in the middle, even after 3 years. He lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. Questions from Eleanor, perhaps a phone call from Raymond, the ordinary rhythms of a life deliberately made small. But tonight, he was home, and that was enough. Morning arrived gray and gentle. Marcus woke before his alarm, as he always did. The habit of 20 years in the military didn't fade just because the uniform hung in the back of a closet. He lay still for a moment, listening to the house settle around him. The creak of old pipes, the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the soft patter of Lily's feet already moving toward the bathroom. Sunday, soup, day. He rose and stretched, feeling the familiar ache in his left leg where the bullets had torn through muscle and bone 15 years ago. The doctors had said he'd never run. Again. He'd proved them wrong within 6 months. Stubbornness, Sarah had called it. He preferred determination. By the time he reached the kitchen, Lily was already there, standing on her step stool, pulling vegetables from the refrigerator with serious concentration. "You're up early," he said. "Soup waits for no one." She placed a carrot on the counter with ceremonial importance. "That's what Mommy used to say." "She did say that." Marcus smiled and tied on his apron, a faded thing covered in cartoon chickens that Lily had picked out for his birthday 2 years ago. "What kind are we making today?" "Vegetable, with the little noodles shaped like stars." "Excellent choice." They worked in comfortable silence, falling into the rhythm they'd developed over 3 years of Sunday mornings. Lily washed vegetables while Marcus chopped. She measured spices while he prepared the broth. Their kitchen was small, their tools were worn, but the soup they made together carried something no restaurant could replicate. Love. That was the secret ingredient, always had been. "Daddy?" Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. "Yeah, sweetheart." "What was the lady like from your date?" Marcus paused mid-chop. He'd known the question would come. Lily had been thinking about it since she woke. He could see it in the way she kept glancing at him sideways. "She was..." He searched for honest words that wouldn't burden a 7-year-old. "Complicated." "Complicated how?" "She had a hard time seeing people clearly. She looked at the outside and thought she knew the inside." Lily considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "Like judging a book by its cover?" "Exactly like that." "That's what the mean kids at school do." Lily stirred the pot with careful attention. "They see my old backpack and think I'm not worth talking to." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He knelt down to her level, abandoning the cutting board. "Does that happen a lot?" Lily shrugged, a gesture too world-weary for her age. "Sometimes. But Mrs. Rodriguez says that people who judge like that are usually scared inside. They put others down to feel bigger." "Mrs. Rodriguez sounds wise." "She is. She gives me extra crackers at snack time." Lily looked up, her eyes holding questions beyond her years. "Was the lady scared inside, Daddy? Is that why she was mean to you?" Marcus thought about Victoria, her designer armor, her cutting words, the way she'd crumbled when confronted with the gap between who she was and who she thought she was. "I think so, sweetheart. I think she built walls so high she forgot there was a person inside them." "That's sad." "It is." "Will she learn to be nicer?" Marcus returned to his chopping, considering the question carefully. He thought about Victoria's face in the parking lot, the mascara streaks, the broken pride, the first glimpse of something authentic beneath the performance. "I hope so. Sometimes it takes a big moment to show people who they really are. What they do after that moment is what matters." Lily nodded solemnly. "Mommy said everyone deserves a second chance, even the mean kids." "Mommy was right about most things. She was right about you." Lily reached over and patted his arm with her small hand. "She said you were the best person she ever met, that you saved people and never bragged about it." Marcus's throat closed around words that wouldn't come. 3 years, and Sarah still found ways to reach him through their daughter. "I just did my job," he managed. "Mommy said that's what heroes always say." Lily returned to stirring, satisfied that the conversation had reached its proper conclusion. "The soup's almost ready. Can I add the star noodles now?" Go ahead, chef. She poured the noodles in with exaggerated care, watching them sink and swirl through the golden broth. Steam rose between them, carrying the scent of vegetables and memories. The doorbell rang. Marcus frowned. Eleanor usually texted before, coming over. The mailman didn't work Sundays. Neighbors kept to themselves. Stay here, he told Lily, wiping his hands on the chicken apron. He moved through the living room with the quiet alertness that never fully left him. Through the window beside the door, he caught a glimpse of blonde hair and an expensive coat. His hand paused on the doorknob. Victoria Ashford stood on his porch, clutching a small gift bag like a lifeline. Looking nothing like the woman who'd laughed at him 20 hours ago, she looked terrified. Marcus opened the door. Victoria stood there in jeans and a simple blouse, a far cry from last night's designer armor. No makeup, no heels, just a woman standing on a stranger's porch, holding a gift bag with trembling hands. How did you find me? His voice carried no accusation, just curiosity. My father, he called the school yesterday, got your address from the emergency contact list. She attempted a smile that faltered immediately. I know I shouldn't be here. I know I have no right. But I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't stop thinking about what I said to you. You drove an hour to tell me that. I drove an hour because a phone call felt like cowardice. Victoria clutched the gift bag tighter. And because there's something I need to give you, not as an apology, nothing could apologize for what I did, just as acknowledgement that I see now, that I understand what I failed to see before. Marcus studied her face. The arrogance had drained away entirely, leaving something raw and uncertain in its place. This wasn't performance. This was a woman standing in unfamiliar territory, trying to find her footing. Daddy? Lily's voice came from behind him. Who's at the door? He turned to find his daughter peering around the corner, wooden spoon still in hand, curiosity written across her features. Victoria's eyes went wide. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. I should have called first. I'll go. Wait. Marcus held up a hand. Lily, this is Victoria. She's an old friend of Grandpa Raymond's. Grandpa Raymond? Lily's face lit up. He sends me birthday cards with too much money in them. Daddy makes me put it in savings. Victoria laughed, a genuine sound, nothing like the cutting laughter from the restaurant. That sounds like him. Would you like to come in? The invitation surprised Marcus as much as it surprised Victoria, but something in her face, the exhaustion, the sincerity, the visible effort, told him this moment mattered. I don't want to intrude. We're making soup, Lily announced. Star noodle soup. Daddy and I make it every Sunday. You could stay for lunch if you want. Victoria looked at Marcus, seeking permission. He stepped aside and held the door open. She entered the small living room like someone visiting a museum, taking in the worn furniture, the family photographs, the evidence of a life built on love rather than luxury. Her eyes lingered on a picture of Sarah, radiant and alive, holding a newborn Lily. Your wife? Sarah. She passed 3 years ago. She was beautiful. She was everything. Victoria nodded slowly, some new understanding settling into her features. And you gave up everything else to be here, to raise your daughter in this house, with Sunday soup and star noodles. I didn't give up anything. I gained everything that matters. She extended the gift bag toward him. This is for Lily. I hope that's okay. My father told me about her, about how she's the center of your world. I thought. Marcus took the bag and peered inside. A children's book, The Invisible Boy, about a quiet child who goes unnoticed until someone finally sees him. I read reviews online, Victoria explained quickly. It's about learning to see people who get overlooked. I thought maybe... She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. It's perfect, Marcus said quietly. Thank you. Lily appeared at his elbow, eyes fixed on the gift bag. Is that for me? It is. From Victoria. Thank you, Lily beamed with uncomplicated joy. Do you want to see our soup? I put the star noodles in myself. Victoria glanced at Marcus one more time. He nodded. I'd love to, she said. Lily grabbed her hand, the same hand that had gestured dismissively in the restaurant, and pulled her toward the kitchen. Victoria followed, stumbling slightly in her flat shoes, looking nothing like a CFO and everything like a woman taking her first steps toward becoming someone new. Marcus watched them go. He thought about Sarah's words, whispered so often they'd become family scripture. Everyone deserves a second chance. Even the ones who don't know they need it yet. Through the kitchen doorway, he heard Lily explaining the proper ratio of noodles to broth while Victoria listened with genuine attention. Maybe this was the real victory, not public vindication, not poetic justice, just the quiet possibility of transformation, offered freely to someone willing to reach for it. He smiled and followed them into the kitchen. The soup was ready. The table could fit 3. And sometimes that was more than enough. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. CEO laughed at the homeless man until he bought her company. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what satisfying injustice should we tackle next?